My name is Judith Reynolds. I'm 36 years old. And this is the story of how my husband abandoned me for a woman from our past, and how karma didn't just knock, it kicked down the door. June 12th was supposed to be a double celebration, our 8th wedding anniversary and my husband Tyler's birthday. I had taken a half-day off from my job at a medical supply company and gone out of my way to prepare a special evening. I'm not the romantic type, not typically. But something about this date, maybe a quiet desperation clawing at me, made me want to try. One last time. I bought Tyler's favorite red wine from a boutique store across town, splurged on Wagyu short ribs from a butcher I couldn't really afford, and ordered a custom cake with the simple inscription. To Tyler, happy birthday and anniversary. I even decorated the balcony with string lights and set the table with silverware I'd polished that morning. Ivory cloth, real candles, 2 wine glasses. I even put on a dress he'd once said made me look unusual, but in a good way. That was before his compliments grew stale and infrequent, like a light switch that stopped working but you kept flicking out of habit. By 7 p.m., everything was ready. At 8 o'clock, I lit the candles. At 9 o'clock, I texted. Dinner's ready. Waiting for you, red heart. No response. At 9:30, I called. 5 rings. Voicemail. At 10:35, the message came, cold and clinical as a dentist's waiting room. Sorry, big client emergency. Have to stay at the office. We'll make it up later. No happy anniversary. No thank you. No mention of the effort I'd clearly made. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. The candles had burned halfway down. The wine hadn't been poured. The cake sat untouched in the fridge. I could still feel the shape of the folded napkin in my lap, the one I had ironed for him. My heart didn't break, not in the dramatic, shattering way people expect. It shifted. Something subtle snapped out of place, like a picture on the wall slowly tilting until you finally notice it's crooked. I cleaned everything up without a sound. Took down the lights. Boxed the meat. Packed the cake into plastic containers and shoved them into the freezer. I went to bed fully dressed, mascara still clinging to my lashes like it was trying to convince me the night wasn't a complete waste. Tyler didn't come home that night. The next morning, he still hadn't called. I waited until lunch, then dialed his office number. The receptionist paused a second too long before saying, "Oh, he doesn't work here anymore. He resigned 3 days ago." I stood frozen in the hallway of my office, the walls suddenly too close, the air too thick. My husband, the man I had just prepared a candlelit anniversary for, had quit his job and hadn't told me. And now he wasn't even pretending to be busy. He was gone. When I got home, I saw it, the first physical proof. His shoes were gone from the second row of the rack. Not all of them, just his favorite pair. The duffel bag we usually used for weekend trips? Missing. I rushed into the bedroom and found him standing by the closet, folding a navy suit into a suitcase with the kind of calm I used for grocery shopping. "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice barely registered. Tyler looked at me like I was a grocery store clerk who'd asked if he had a rewards card. "You're back," he said flatly, then continued packing. "Where are you going?" I stepped closer. "Albuquerque," he replied. "Accepted a new job. Starts Monday." I blinked. "You quit your job? Without telling me?" He said nothing. Instead, he pulled out a folder and placed it on the bed. Divorce papers. Neatly printed, every page clipped together like he'd been planning this for weeks. Months, maybe. "You're no longer the wife I need," he said, not even turning to face me. "You always put work first. You barely cook. The house is always dusty." I actually laughed, short, bitter. "You come home late. You don't eat the meals I do make. You keep secrets and lock your laptop. You tell me not to clean your office, not to touch your things, and now I'm not enough? He looked up, eyes glinting like polished steel. A real wife doesn't need reminders. That's when it hit me, this wasn't about dust or dinners. It was about something he'd already replaced me with. Someone. I'm not signing these, I said, shoving the folder back toward him. Doesn't matter, he said. I've already filed. Just don't make this harder than it has to be. He zipped up the suitcase and pushed past me like I was part of the furniture. I stood there, breathless, still gripping a napkin from the night before, while the man I'd spent 8 years building a life with walked out without even a backward glance. 2 days later, the apartment office called to inform me Tyler had requested to terminate the lease. He'd signed everything. Left a note saying I'd handle the rest. I found the receipts for all our furniture in the drawer. Every item, from our fridge to the sofa, was in my name. He took only his clothes and a few gadgets. Not even a lamp. The divorce papers stayed on the kitchen table for 3 days. Each time I passed, I stared at them, as if the words might change if I read them long enough. But they never did. What did change, though, was me. On the 4th night, I got an invite notification for my high school reunion. It had been scheduled months ago, and I had RSVP'd yes back when I still thought Tyler would be standing next to me. Now, it felt like a cruel joke. The last thing I wanted was to face people I hadn't seen in years, acting like my life was fine. But that Friday night, something unexpected happened. I caught my reflection in the mirror, tired eyes, but still sharp. Still mine. And I realized I had nothing to prove. No one to impress. But I was still standing. So I went. And that night, that one decision, would begin unraveling every lie Tyler had built. The bar was loud. Not just crowded loud, but echo of teenage chaos kind of loud. The kind where old classmates laugh louder than they need to, just to prove to the universe that they've made it. That they're fine. That they're winning. Moonlight Brewery was downtown Denver's little slice of nostalgia. It had exposed brick walls, Edison bulb lights, and the kind of overpriced beer menu that tried to disguise the taste of regret. I stood just inside the doorway, half wishing I had stayed home, until I heard someone call my name. Judith? I turned. Nathan Thompson, tall, warm-eyed, and slightly scruffy, was holding out a beer and grinning like we were still kids waiting for math class to end. Nathan? I blinked. Wow, you look good. He chuckled. Divorce and daycare will do that to you. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Single dad of a 6-year-old. She's the only boss I really answer to. That made me smile, the first real one in days. He didn't ask how I was, and I was grateful for that. We ended up tucked into a quiet corner booth, shielded from most of the crowd. It was comfortable. Easy. Which made what I had to say next feel strangely natural. I'm getting divorced. He didn't flinch. Didn't say, I'm sorry, or ask 1,000 nosy questions. He just nodded and replied, that sucks. You hungry? The pretzels here are still trash. That one sentence made me feel more seen than anything Tyler had said in the past 3 years. Nathan and I talked for hours, about nothing and everything. Childhood. Work. Regrets. Small dreams. Big mistakes. When he asked about Tyler again, I didn't go into detail. I didn't need to. I simply said, he left. Not for work. For someone else. Nathan nodded slowly. Then you're better off. Some people will only love the version of you that serves their ego. That stuck with me. By the time I left the brewery, the Colorado air had turned crisp. I rolled down my window, let the wind mess up my hair, and turned on the radio. Whitney Houston's voice came on, it's not right, but it's okay. I laughed. It was too poetic to be coincidence. I don't know what possessed Tyler to call me that Sunday morning. Maybe guilt. Maybe pride. Maybe he just wanted to twist the knife a little deeper. His voice was flat. Emotionless. I've terminated the lease, he said. You should start packing. No, how are you? No, do you have a place to go? Just a cold command. You don't think I should have been asked first? I asked, calmly, but there was fire buried just under my skin. You're an adult. Figure it out. I placed my coffee mug on the table and said quietly, good. I'll sign. And Tyler? Don't call me again. He didn't respond. I hung up before he could. That was the last time I heard from him, until the email. Exactly 1 week later, just before midnight, a message popped into my inbox. The subject line, proof. I hesitated. Opened it. And stared. A marriage certificate. Groom, Tyler Robert James. Bride, Marissa Ellis Whitmore. County, Bernalillo, New Mexico. Date of marriage, 1 day after our divorce was finalized. Attached to it was a photo. A lavish outdoor wedding, complete with string lights, rose arches, and Tyler, grinning like a man who had finally escaped prison. But it wasn't the photo that stunned me. It was her face. Marissa Whitmore. The name flickered through my memory like a burned-out light bulb. Something about it itched at the edges of recognition. Tyler called within minutes, practically giddy. You saw it, right, he said. I got remarried. Life's never been better. I didn't speak. She's the daughter of the Whitmore family. They own the entire real estate group in Santa Fe. Got me a VP position. Built us a house. She's pregnant, too. 3 months along. My throat was dry, but my voice was steady. So that's why you rushed the divorce. He gave a smug chuckle. Not entirely. I just couldn't keep living with someone who didn't act like a real wife. And that was the end of the conversation for me. Until the name, Marissa, wouldn't leave my mind. I opened Facebook and searched her name. Her profile came up instantly. Gorgeous profile picture. Platinum blonde waves. Striking blue eyes. Designer everything. But as I scrolled through her photos, one stopped me cold. A yearbook photo. Same name. Different face. Flat nose. Acne scars. Thin lips. Bunny teeth. Marissa Ellis. She had gone to high school with me. She used to sit 2 rows behind me in homeroom. She was quiet. Fragile. Bullied mercilessly for her skin and her awkward posture. She rarely spoke unless called on. People forgot her name even while it was being said. And now, she was unrecognizable. I called Lana, my high school best friend, and asked one question. Do you remember Marissa Ellis? Lana practically snorted. The one who vanished after junior year? Yeah. Why? I told her everything. The divorce. The marriage. The sudden job. The pregnancy. Oh, Judith, she sighed. Marissa didn't vanish. She rebranded. She went to New York. Studied art. Had half her face redone. Eyes, jawline, skin grafts, the works. I heard she was with some married architect in Brooklyn for a while. Then she came back rich and mysterious. So that's who Tyler married. A woman who had spent years surgically erasing the person she once was. And suddenly, I understood why the wedding photo looked like a magazine ad. Why Tyler spoke about her like she was porcelain. Why he left without warning. He didn't marry Marissa. He married a carefully engineered illusion. But illusions don't last. And the moment he called me again, this time, panicked, scared, confused, I knew the cracks were beginning to show. Judith, he said, his voice raw. The baby doesn't look like me. Or her. We did a test, the baby's mine, but she doesn't look like either of us. I didn't laugh, but inside, I felt something stir. A shift. A quiet sense of poetic justice. And I knew, this story wasn't over. It was just beginning. I leaned back into my kitchen chair, letting Tyler's shaky voice buzz against my ear like a dying battery. You knew something, he said again, more urgently this time. The night I called, when I told you about Marissa, you laughed. You knew something, didn't you? I didn't answer right away. My coffee had gone cold, but I held the mug anyway. Something about its warmth, or what was left of it, helped me hold back the smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. I just found it interesting, I finally said, tone light and unbothered. You rushed into a new life with a woman who worked so hard to become someone else, and now you're shocked the baby doesn't match either version of you. Judith, Tyler snapped, this isn't funny. She doesn't look like me or Marissa. She's got this curly black hair, a round nose, squinty little eyes. No one in either of our families looks like that. Maybe she takes after your high school self, I said, soft as silk. Silence. I found your yearbook, I continued, casually. It was shoved at the back of your desk drawer, wrapped in an old sweatshirt. I wasn't snooping. I was cleaning. You know, like a proper wife should. Still silence. You were different then, I added. The curly hair. The acne. The braces. And those bunny teeth, remember? You used to smile without opening your mouth. I always wondered why you avoided group photos. Why you never let me meet any of your college friends. Why you wanted a small wedding. Now I get it. You didn't just want a new life, you wanted a new face to match it. Tyler exhaled like the wind had been knocked from his chest. I changed because I had to. I didn't want to be that kid anymore. You changed because you were ashamed, I said. And you married someone else with the same disease. Another pause. And then the crack, Marissa won't hold the baby. I blinked. She just won't, Tyler whispered. She cried for hours after giving birth. The nurses tried to place the baby on her chest and she turned away. She said she needed rest. Said the baby's eyes were unsettling. Her mom had to take over. She hasn't touched her daughter since. There it was. The truth. Not about paternity. Not about deception. But about rejection. Tyler hadn't married love. He hadn't married stability. He had married a mirror. And now he was horrified by what stared back through the face of his own child. You once said I wasn't a real wife, I said. Because I didn't sacrifice enough. But you're the one walking away from your own daughter. Because she reminds you of what you tried to erase. I didn't give him time to respond. I hope you don't make her carry your shame, I said. That little girl is innocent. She didn't ask to be born into your vanity. Then I hung up. Blocked his number. That was the last time I heard Tyler's voice. In the months that followed, I started over. Not dramatically. Not with some fairy tale makeover. But quietly. Completely. I signed the divorce papers and submitted them through my attorney. I packed my things from our old apartment and moved to Boulder. I found a cozy place with a tiny balcony that overlooked rolling green hills. I didn't need a view of the city anymore. I needed peace. I reduced my hours at work. Started walking in the mornings. Took a weekend art class. I painted clumsy still lives and lopsided trees. I met up with Nathan again, no promises, no pressure. Just quiet companionship. Simple. Safe. We laughed over cheap wine and bad TV. He never asked about Tyler. And I never felt the need to explain. And most days, I forgot Tyler existed. Until one afternoon, nearly a year later, when I bumped into Lana at a bookstore. She was holding a used copy of The Bell Jar and sipping oat milk chai. "You haven't heard?" she asked, eyes wide with that gossipy twinkle I knew too well. "Heard what?" I asked, already preparing to brace myself. "Marissa is looking for a divorce lawyer." I didn't flinch. "Let me guess, Tyler cheated again?" Bingo. New hire at the Whitmore Company. Some intern fresh out of college. Marissa found out months ago but kept quiet for the kid. "Their daughter?" I asked. 3 years old now, Lana replied, then lowered her voice. "It gets worse." She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot from a mom group thread, some preschool parent forum that had gotten hold of local gossip. "There's a new girl in class," the message read. Her mom had full facial surgery. The other kids found old photos somehow. They've been teasing her, saying, "Your mom used to be ugly." Poor thing cried all week. I stared at the screen. My stomach twisted. Even though I had long let go of the anger, the betrayal, the abandonment, this burned. The little girl was being punished for sins that weren't hers. For appearances. For secrets. For a lie sewn into her DNA by two people who thought they could rewrite the truth with money and a scalpel. "Marissa regrets having the baby," Lana said. She thought the child would inherit her post-surgery looks. But she didn't. The kid looks like the real them. Both of them. I closed my eyes for a second. Not because I couldn't handle it. But because I didn't want to cry, not for Tyler, not for Marissa, but for a child born into a house that only knew how to hide. I said nothing else to Lana. Just hugged her goodbye and left the bookstore. That evening, I picked up a croissant from my favorite bakery, walked through the park near my apartment, and sat beneath a sycamore tree. The golden light filtered through the leaves like hope dripping from the sky. I had everything I needed. No mansion. No VP husband. No luxury car. But peace. Real peace. And after everything, that was the rarest, richest thing of all. Some people spend their lives polishing masks. Trying to outshine their pasts with perfect veneers and Instagram-filtered smiles. But sooner or later, time or fate holds up a mirror. And when it does, that mask shatters. It was a warm Friday evening when I got a message from Nathan. "Want to meet at the farmer's market tomorrow morning? Ava wants to find the biggest apple ever grown." I smiled. It was ordinary. Comforting. Real. The kind of text that didn't demand anything from me except to show up, no makeup, no pretense, just presence. That's the life I had carved out since Tyler left. Or more accurately, since I let him go. Not because I'd forgiven him, I hadn't needed to. But because his shadow no longer reached into the corners of my world. Still, when Lana's words about Marissa's daughter circled back in my mind, the teasing, the tears, the rejection, I couldn't shake a quiet anger that lingered beneath my ribs. I had no right to intervene. I had no connection to that little girl. But somewhere deep inside me, I couldn't help feeling responsible. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I once believed in a man who didn't know how to love truthfully. And now a child was paying the price. I didn't speak to Tyler. I didn't reach out. But curiosity has its own rhythm. One afternoon, I searched again. Not for his name. For hers. Marissa Ellis Whitmore. Her social media was mostly dormant now. The once glamorous posts had dwindled to promotional art gallery images and vague motivational quotes. But tucked between them, buried deep in the photo section, was an image that froze me in place. It was taken at a charity brunch. Nothing remarkable. Except in the background, half hidden behind a vase of white lilies, stood a little girl, 3, maybe 4 years old. She had thick, dark curls pulled into uneven pigtails. Large brown eyes that didn't smile. A soft round face that hadn't yet learned to perform. She wasn't posing. She wasn't styled. She was simply real. And I saw it. Not in a bitter way. Not with judgment. But with absolute clarity. That child looked nothing like the fabricated version of Marissa or Tyler. She looked like the raw, untouched pasts they both tried to bury. She was the one truth that had slipped through the cracks in their porcelain facade. And she was beautiful. Not in the sculpted, frozen way of magazine covers. But in the way children are, unfiltered, honest, untamed. I closed the tab and turned off my laptop. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but with something quieter. A deep sorrow. For the innocence already being chipped away by grown-ups too obsessed with mirrors to look out a window. That night, I had a dream. I was standing in my old apartment, the one Tyler and I once shared. Only now it was empty, every room gutted, every surface stripped bare. But in the corner of our old bedroom sat a little girl. Her hair wild. Her knees drawn to her chest. She looked up at me with wide eyes and asked, "Why don't they want me?" I woke up crying. I hadn't cried for Tyler. Not when he left. Not when he remarried. Not when he called in a panic about the baby's face. But for that dream, that question, I wept like something sacred had broken. I called Lana the next day. "Do you have Marissa's gallery info?" I asked. Yeah. Why?" "I want to buy a piece." Quietly. Anonymously. She didn't push. Later that week, Lana sent me a private gallery link. I browsed through the paintings, all abstract, all cold. They were technically impressive, but sterile. I chose a small piece, a swirl of muted blues and grays, and paid through a business alias. I added a note. "There's more honesty in your old work than anything you've tried to hide." I don't know if she ever saw it. I don't know if she knew it came from me. That wasn't the point. It wasn't revenge. It was a reflection. A reminder that no matter how far you run, the past has a voice, and sometimes, it speaks through the eyes of your child. Months passed. The seasons changed. Nathan and I grew closer, not through grand gestures, but through grocery runs, game nights, and silent understandings. His daughter Ava once asked me if I was her bonus grown-up, and I nearly cried in the cereal aisle. There was no ring. No pressure. No second wedding dress in a glassy garden. Just peace. Just presence. Just me, learning how to live without explaining myself. Then one day, Lana messaged me again. "They're done," she said. Marissa filed for divorce. I didn't even blink. "She's staying with her parents," Lana continued. "Tyler's in some downtown condo. They're splitting custody." "Of the child?" I asked. "Yeah. But from what I've heard, neither really fights for time with her." That part made me sick. Sometimes the grandparents take her for weeks. Marissa says the girl doesn't feel like hers. And Tyler's always too busy closing deals. That evening, I sat on the same balcony where I used to imagine a perfect life with Tyler. Only now, it wasn't strung with lights or littered with half-empty wine glasses. It had a single potted rosemary plant, a soft chair, and the sunset. And it was enough. I had no revenge to plot. No scheme to launch. The universe had done what I never could, it exposed everything. Not with rage, but with truth. Not by force, but by letting the truth take its time. And as I looked out at the hills painted in amber light, I whispered a quiet hope. That someday, that little girl would grow up and see herself, not through the lens of her mother's surgeries or her father's insecurities, but as a reflection of something real. Something unbreakable. Because that's what she was. A mirror they couldn't control. And the one piece of truth they couldn't edit. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it echoes in your bones. That's the silence I carried after Lana's last message. Tyler and Marissa were finished. Not just legally. Emotionally. Spiritually. Their glitter-coated fairy tale had dissolved into joint custody forms and cold handoffs in parking lots. And the child? She became the ghost between them, visible but unwanted. I didn't speak of it to Nathan. Not because I didn't trust him, but because there are some things so heavy they warp the mood of even the gentlest rooms. He knew, though. The way I paused when Ava hugged me goodnight. The way my eyes lingered when we passed mothers braiding their daughters' hair in the park. One evening, as we sat on his back porch watching Ava chase lightning bugs barefoot in the yard, he gently asked, "Do you ever think about having kids?" It wasn't an accusation. Just a question. Quiet. Careful. I took a long breath. "I used to," I said. "When I was younger, I thought love was a requirement for motherhood. That it had to come bundled with a ring, a plan, and a happy husband." He nodded, listening. "But now," I continued, "I know better. I know love can exist without permission. That sometimes, the deepest kind of love is just seeing a child for who they are, and not expecting them to fix something in you." He didn't say anything. Just reached over and gently squeezed my hand. That night, as I walked home, I remembered something Marissa once posted on her old Facebook, years ago, before the surgeries and the rebrand. It was a blurry photo of a sketchbook page. The caption read, "No one ever hugged me without adjusting something first." It haunted me. I hadn't understood it then. But now, I did. Because that's how she'd lived, adjusting herself until the hugs felt deserved. And in that constant reshaping, she'd forgotten how to give love that wasn't conditional. And Tyler? He had only ever loved reflections. As long as the mirror flattered him, he stayed. When it cracked, he ran. What they both failed to realize is this: DNA doesn't just carry eye color or jawlines. It carries history. Shame. Courage. Fear. It carries all the things we don't say, and eventually, it demands to be heard. 1 month later, Lana texted me again. "You're not going to believe this." I braced myself. Marissa filed a motion to change the girl's last name. I blinked. To what? To her maiden name, Ellis. Not Whitmore. She's saying the name Whitmore carries too much weight. I stared at my screen, a chill running down my spine. Changing a child's last name wasn't unusual in divorce cases, but doing it to erase association with wealth? That was different. I didn't reply right away. I went online instead. Searched for court filings in Bernalillo County. And sure enough, there it was, Ellis versus James, petition for name change of minor. In the documents, Marissa claimed that the father has distanced himself from the child emotionally and physically, and the surname change would support the child's identity and security within her maternal family network. Translation: Tyler had disappeared. Again. It was poetic. The man who had once accused me of being not enough, of being too dull, too dusty, too career-focused, had abandoned the very child he swore would give him the perfect new life. And now, even Marissa didn't want that child to bear his name. I sat in my apartment that evening, lights low, a single candle flickering on the windowsill. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to mourn. Not for Tyler. Not for what we used to be. But for the illusion I had once worked so hard to preserve. Because the truth was, I had known for years that Tyler didn't really see me. He saw my usefulness. My dependability. My silent support. But not me. Not Judith. Not the woman who once stayed up past midnight proofreading his pitches. Not the woman who sacrificed friendships, weekends, her own dreams to hold his world together while he built a different one behind her back. And now, he'd lost everything, including the legacy he thought he could control. What he didn't understand, and never would, is that legacy isn't built on perfect homes or prestigious job titles. It's built on presence. On holding a crying child at 2 a.m. On picking up the phone when your partner's voice sounds hollow. On staying, not because it's convenient, but because you promised. Tyler had none of that. And Marissa? She had turned her entire life into a performance. But her daughter didn't care about cheekbones or designer nurseries. She just wanted to be held. Wanted to belong. And now neither of them knew how to give her that. Weeks passed. I kept painting on weekends. Nathan's daughter started calling me Juju and insisted I help her name her new pet fish. His name is Sir Bubbles, she declared one morning with absolute confidence. And then, one random Tuesday, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph. It was small. Faded. Clearly taken in secret. But it was unmistakable. It showed the little girl, Tyler and Marissa's daughter, standing in front of a preschool art easel. Her face was smeared with paint, her curls pulled back by a neon green headband. But it was her eyes that stopped me. They weren't smiling. They were searching. And on the back of the photo was a single handwritten sentence. "This is the face we didn't deserve." No name. No signature. Just that. And I knew someone, somewhere, still had a conscience. Maybe it was Marissa's mother. Maybe a nanny. Maybe a teacher. But someone saw her. And maybe, one day, she would too. There are two kinds of inheritances in this world, the ones you leave behind in your will, and the ones you hand over in silence, trauma, shame, rejection. Legacies dressed as love. Burdens disguised as bloodlines. That photograph stayed on my kitchen counter for weeks. I didn't frame it. I didn't hide it. I didn't even tell Nathan about it. It just sat there, sometimes beside the sugar jar, other times beneath the stack of grocery lists, like a quiet reminder of everything I'd survived, and everything she'd one day have to understand. I didn't need revenge. But I did need truth. Not the kind you scream in courtrooms or spray across social media. The quiet kind. The kind that sinks deep into your bones and lets you breathe again. One Saturday afternoon, I met up with Lana again. We sat at a corner cafe, sipping iced coffee, watching the summer crowd pass by like extras in someone else's movie. She scrolled her phone with a casual flick before freezing. Oh. My. God. She turned the screen toward me. It was a new post from the Whitmore Realty Company's official page. Tyler had been released from his executive position, citing irreconcilable internal issues and a breach of confidentiality. I blinked. What did he do? Lana snorted. Rumor is, he leaked sales data to a competitor after Marissa's parents sided with her in the divorce. He thought sabotaging them would get him a better offer elsewhere. Let me guess, it didn't. Bingo. Tyler had gambled everything and lost, again. It was almost boring at this point. Predictable. But what caught my attention wasn't the fall. It was what came after. A few days later, Lana sent me a link to a personal blog. A teacher from one of the elite preschools in Santa Fe had written a post, anonymously, but the context was unmistakable. The entry was titled, "When a Child Carries the Shame of Her Parents." The post told of a little girl with wild curls and curious eyes who often sat alone during snack time. How the child rarely smiled, avoided mirrors, and one day, when asked to draw a family portrait, only drew herself, surrounded by gray clouds. The teacher wrote, "Her beauty is real. But no one ever told her. She only hears about who she doesn't look like. What she's not. Who she shouldn't remind them of." I didn't cry when I read it. I felt something colder. Anger. Not the sharp, white-hot fury of betrayal. This was deeper. A soul-deep ache. Because children aren't born ashamed, they're taught it. In glances. In sighs. In silence. And that little girl was drowning in all three. I didn't know her name. I had never held her. But I knew her. I was her, once. Not in appearance. But in absence. In rejection. In the way your voice grows small because no one listens when it's full. That week, I made a decision. I called a lawyer, one I knew from a community center project I'd helped with last year. I want to set up a trust, I said. Anonymous. For a child. He didn't ask questions. Just gave me the paperwork and guided me through it. I funneled a portion of the savings I'd kept from my divorce settlement into it. Nothing extravagant, but enough. Enough to fund art classes, therapy, books, braces. Whatever she needed down the line. On the form, under beneficiary, I simply wrote Ellis J., for the girl who carries too much. It wasn't about guilt. Or redemption. It was about giving her something no one else had so far, a choice. If she wanted to chase beauty, let it be because she saw it in herself, not because her parents feared their reflection. If she wanted to walk away from the names tied to her pain, let her have a bridge. If she wanted silence, let it be peaceful, not punishing. The trust would be released to her at 18. She might never know where it came from. And that was fine. She didn't need to. She just needed to feel like someone saw her. And I did. A few weeks later, I ran into Tyler. It was at a gas station outside Boulder, of all places. He looked thinner, paler, like someone who'd been living under artificial light for too long. His hair was slightly longer, beard unkempt. He didn't notice me at first. He was staring down at his phone, frowning at something. Maybe an email. Maybe nothing at all. I didn't approach him. But when he turned and caught my eye, I saw a flicker, recognition, followed by discomfort. Like I was a ghost of the life he couldn't quite outrun. He gave a weak nod. Not quite an apology. Not quite a greeting. Just acknowledgement. And that was all I needed. I walked past him without stopping. No words. No closure. He didn't deserve a speech. He didn't deserve my anger. He deserved to be forgotten. But as I sat in my car, I watched him in the rearview mirror, shoulders slumped, alone, fumbling with his credit card at the pump. And for the first time since he left, I didn't feel sad. I felt free. The man who once told me I was too cold, too tired, too distracted to be a real wife was now divorced, unemployed, and ignored by the very child he thought would complete his fantasy. He built his dream life with glass. And then shattered it from the inside. And me? I had nothing flashy. No mansion. No high society photoshoots. No curated image to uphold. Just a soft morning light. A balcony full of herbs. A little girl who calls me Juju. And a peace that wrapped around me like a silk robe stitched from every piece of pain I'd survived. I didn't just rebuild. I became. And the woman I became? She doesn't flinch when ghosts from the past pass by. She simply walks forward, knowing the truth always outlasts the lie. When I was younger, I used to believe closure came from confrontation. That healing meant getting answers. That peace required an apology. But now, after everything, I understand something much simpler, much truer. Closure isn't a door someone else has to close for you. It's the moment you realize you were never trapped inside that room in the first place. And I walked out long ago. A year had passed since I signed my name on those divorce papers. A single signature that once felt like the end of everything, but now? It read more like a passport stamp, my official exit from a life where I was invisible. I'd started painting more. The canvases still weren't perfect, most weren't even good, but they were mine. Some days, I'd wake up early, just to sit on the balcony and feel the light hit my cheek without guilt or urgency. Nathan had become a part of my life, like breath, consistent, steady, without demanding all the air. His daughter, Ava, was starting kindergarten soon. She made me a hand-drawn card on construction paper that read, "I love Juju because she listens. No glitter. No polish. Just crayons and truth." And that's when it hit me. That's all any child really wants. Not perfection. Not pageantry. Just someone who sees them. Hears them. Holds space for them to be real. Tyler and Marissa had failed to do that. Their daughter, Alice, bore the scars of being born into a story written for appearances, not people. And as fate would have it, I learned her name from a woman I never expected to meet. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was at the local library, of all places, flipping through a display of community paintings in the children's wing. A woman beside me was holding a little girl's hand, gently adjusting the strap of her backpack. The girl had wild curls, a slightly crooked smile, and eyes that seemed to carry galaxies of things she didn't know how to say yet. I knew her instantly. She was shorter than I expected. Quieter. But the moment I saw her fingers gripping the hem of her shirt, I recognized the nervous habit, the same one I'd had as a child. The one I still had when I was bracing for disappointment. The woman, her grandmother, I presumed, looked over and smiled politely. She followed my eyes and then nodded toward one of the paintings tacked up at child height. "Ellis made that one," she said softly. It was a swirl of warm colors, oranges, reds, yellows, shaped into what looked like a sun inside a heart. "It's beautiful," I said. "She says it's what happiness should feel like," the woman added, a bit wistfully. "We're working on helping her find it outside of paintings, too." I nodded gently. We didn't say much more. But as they walked away, Ellis looked back at me. Just for a second. And smiled. Not wide. Not fake. But real. Tentative. As if daring to believe the world could be kind. And I smiled back. That was all. I never told her who I was. I never asked questions. She didn't need to know about the years her father had spent pretending. Or the woman her mother used to be. She didn't need to carry any more of their shadows. She just needed light. And she would find it. Because I had. In the end, Tyler's downfall wasn't dramatic. It wasn't plastered across newspapers or whispered at gala tables. It was quiet. Lingering. He became a man who once had everything, and now had nothing he truly valued. His new jobs didn't last. His charm wore thin. People stopped inviting him. And the child he once thought would be the final jewel in his curated life? She had his blood, but none of his illusions. Marissa retreated, too. Her gallery quietly closed. She was spotted only occasionally, walking alone, always behind dark sunglasses. She had tried to edit her face, her name, her history. But life, as it does, always renders the rawest parts visible again. Their empire wasn't burned to the ground. It just eroded. One hollow choice at a time. But me? I chose to build. Not for anyone else's approval. Not to prove anything. But because life on the other side of betrayal is quiet, rich, and real, if you let it be. And if you're wondering whether I ever forgave Tyler, I didn't need to. That was never for him. That was for me. He can carry the weight of what he lost. I'm too busy living what I found. So here's what I'll say to anyone sitting in a house filled with silence, wondering if the pain they feel is too small to count. It counts. Your tears. Your questions. Your lonely dinners and lit candles that burned for no one, they all count. And one day, when the people who hurt you are scrambling to rewrite the story, you won't need revenge. Because time and truth always reveal everything. I didn't have to lift a finger. They buried themselves. And I bloomed. Judith's story is a reminder that healing isn't loud, but it is powerful. That you don't always have to fight to win. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply outgrowing the people who once made you feel small. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more stories where justice finds its own way, even when no one's looking.